Hello. Welcome to the New York Write-In Governor's Debate. I am Chrissie Mayr. I'm so honored to be involved with moderating this event tonight, along with my co-moderator here, Peter LaVenia. We have candidates Larry Sharpe, who is the Libertarian Party candidate, who you can follow on Twitter at Larry Sharpe, and check out his website, larrysharpe.com. And we have Howie Hawkins, who is the Green Party candidate. You can follow him on Twitter at Howie Hawkins, and then check out his website, howiehawkins.us. We're going to have this be about an hour-long debate, and we're going to try to have this go as close as we can to the debate that Hochul and Zeldin had, as far as covering similar topics, but we're going to put our own spin on it, of course. And I'm not a debate moderating expert, so feel free to tell me if I'm screwing this up. Okay. For me personally, I think the economy is the most important issue right now. We've been hearing for a couple of years now, people are kind of fleeing the state of New York, and it seems even more recently with inflation, it seems very hard for just regular people to get by. Groceries are more expensive. Everyone knows this. These are all topics we've been hearing about for so long. Groceries are up. Gases are up. So I guess what I personally want to hear you guys talk about in your takes, on the economy. But before that, I want us to do our opening statements. See, I've already screwed this up. Let's start with Larry for your opening statement, and then we'll go on to Howie.
Well, I think your point about the economy is absolutely on the money, right? The biggest issues that we're dealing with in New York State right now are actually people leaving, right? New Yorkers are leaving in droves. There's no tomorrow. It's been happening for over a decade. Literally last month, over 6,000 New Yorkers changed their license from New York to Florida. Think about that. Over 6,000. That's 200 a day. They're all leaving like there's no tomorrow. And that's a problem, right? I don't want them to be leaving New York, and they are. How do we fix that? We fix that by dealing with opportunity. We deal with that. We fix that by dealing with affordability. And we deal with that by dealing with, as you mentioned, safety. All of those. We try to fix opportunity, affordability, and safety. And we do that without just yelling other guy bad. Right? That's what we've been doing. The left yells the right is bad. The right yells left is bad. What you're going to find today is that we're going to give you actual answers. We're going to tell you what we think and how we can make this work. That's what we're going to be doing tonight.
Okay, great. Howie, your opening statement.
Well, thank you, Chrissie, for hosting this debate. Larry and I should have been on the Spectrum News debate last week. We both got double the votes we needed in 2018 to secure a ballot line through this year, 2022. But Andrew Cuomo and the Democrats changed up on us in midstream and tripled the requirements in terms of votes we needed. They added the presidential election and then the signatures we needed to get back on the ballot. So here we are. And by the way, I'm on my gubernatorial campaign website is hawkinsmatera.org.
Oh, okay.
HowieHawkins.us is my presidential campaign.
Okay, we'll update that.
Hawkinsmatera.org to find out about the campaign. Look, the first reason I'm asking for a write-in vote is to protest this exclusionary ballot access law that kept the Greens and the Libertarians off the ballot. This is the first time since 1946, and the only other time since 1891 when they first introduced state-issued secret ballots, that only the Democrat and Republican are on the ballot. Voters have been denied all their choices. So I'm asking for your vote for an inclusive multi-party democracy. And being the Green Party candidate, of course, I'm appealing to socialists and liberals and progressive populists to vote for the Greens for the progressive agenda that the Democrats talk about. There are lots of bills in the legislature, but they don't pass them. So a vote for us is a vote for a Green New Deal, for 100% clean energy and zero emissions in 10 years. A program that my running mate and I, my running mate Gloria Matera, first campaigned for in 2010. And here we are, and little's being done about the climate crisis. It's a vote for an economic bill of rights. So everybody has an opportunity a right to a living wage job, an income above poverty, affordable housing, comprehensive health care, and lifelong public education from child care through college. And finally, it's a vote for the inclusive democracy, not just fair ballot access, but we want ranked choice voting for statewide offices, including senators and president. That ends a spoiler problem that people face in the winner-take-all system, and for proportional representation in the legislature through ranked choice voting in multi-member districts. That eliminates gerrymandering. Right now, almost all of our districts are non-competitive, one-party districts. We know who's going to win before the election happens. It's a farce. So we need these changes to really have an inclusive democracy. So those are good reasons to write in Howie Hawkins and Gloria Matera.
This is not even written on the sheet, but I'm wondering what each of you say to the very popular comment of, oh, if you vote for Green Party or if you vote Libertarian, you're throwing your vote away. You're helping Hochul win. Don't do it. I want to know what you both personally think of when you hear that. We'll start with Larry.
Well, let me start then, and I'll tell you. The reality of it is every single bad thing you're unhappy about, excuse me, everything you don't like came because of the two parties. It all came because of Democrats and Republicans. They're the ones who made everything happen. If you're unhappy about X or unhappy about Y, it's because of Democrats and Republicans. They have been the ones to do it. How's your voting got it so far? How's it worked out for you? Right? Remember something. When you look at someone like, say, Bush in 2000, Bush got us Obama. Obama got us Trump. Trump got us Biden. Who's winning? Nobody's winning. We're fighting to say, hey, this time we'll stop it. But then it just delays your pain for 4 years or 8 years. It's not the way. The way to fix this, when any two people are having a problem, whether they're business partners or lovers or family members, whatever it is, if two people can't talk, you need a third party to come in and try to fix it.
Well, I say to people that look at that lesser evil problem, it's real. The center-left vote for us gets split, and a lot of people settle for the Democrats even though they support our platform. And when you do that, you silence yourself. You get lost in the sauce. You know, if you want a universal health care system with a single public payer, the New York Health Act, which Hochul is opposed to, and you vote for her because she's the lesser evil, you just voted against what you want. You voted against yourself. You got lost in the sauce. Your vote is your voice. And if you want to be heard, vote for what you want and make the politicians come to you.
Yeah. So I guess my question is one that is on the minds of many voters in the last few months, and it's a question about crime. So this is something that the media has been talking about for at least the last year, even though statistically it seems like crime is at pretty steady and low levels compared to what it has been historically. So I'd like to know your thoughts on crime, and because this is an alternative debate, I'd also like you to talk about corporate crime and the corporate crime wave that both Zeldin and Hochul did not talk about, especially talking about things like wage theft and pollution. So Howie, I wonder if you might go first this time.
Well, the issue everybody's debating, and there's a lot of fear-mongering around, is this cashless bail reform for nonviolent and misdemeanor cases. And New York City Comptroller came out with data saying since that's been instituted, it hasn't been a cause driving up crime. So we need to reduce mass incarceration. This country imprisons more people per capita than any country in the world. Countries like Saudi Arabia and Russia and China, very repressive countries. And we put more people in prison. So this is an issue we need to deal with. Instead of fear-mongering, a real crime, anti-crime program would deal with the root causes. And it's rooted in social inequality, which undermines social cohesion. And people are alienated and they feel, okay, they can, steal, property crimes or assault people. It gives them less reason to see that that's wrong. So that's why the Economic Bill of Rights we're talking about would help reduce crime. The corporate crime wave, yeah, it's a massive problem. It's billing fraud and predatory credit practices that are ripping off consumers. And that costs society, the people, a lot more than street crime does. So that should be a priority. And finally, I'll say there were a number of bills before the legislature that did not pass. One was to end qualified immunity, particularly for the cops. And they don't have the same standards. There should be one standard when people are accused of wrongdoing and they aren't liable. The city governments have to take over their liability if they are found guilty. And that costs us a lot of money. There was a Clean Slate Act to clear a person's criminal record after they completed their sentence so they can go and get employment and housing and education. That would affect 2.3 million New Yorkers. That did not pass, and it should. Fair and Timely Parole Act, so that
we're near time, so if you just wrap up. Sorry, just wanted to keep you to time.
Look at you, Peter. You're being so official. This is great. We're loving this.
Well, give me 20 more seconds.
I should have a flag, like throw a red card.
Would evaluate inmates for parole based on their current merit and behavior, not stuff that happened in the past if they've rehabilitated themselves. Elder Parole Act, people 55 and older or who served more than 15 years should be considered for parole. And finally, Challenging Wrongful Convictions Act, so that people who are wrongly convicted and they prove that can clear their names. So there's a lot of things that we can do to make the criminal justice system fairer. And part of the crimes in this society is the mistreatment of people accused of crimes. You know, you're proven innocent until proven guilty. And if bail prevents you and costs you a lot of money before you even had your trial, you know, that violates that principle.
So let me step in if I could, and I'll take like no more than 15 minutes. I'm kidding. I'm just teasing Howie. The problem with what Howie said is I love what he said. I think it's amazing, but it doesn't affect, he didn't really answer the question. And the question is, how do we stop crime? He's talking about reforming prisons. I'm in. Let's reform prisons if we can. No worries. But that's not going to stop crime. Now, there are many reasons why we have more crime. The biggest one was the lockdowns. The lockdowns that we did for 2 years took all our youth, took them out of the job, the working market, took them out of school, took them out of any opportunities, and then on top of it, decided that, you know what, let's make sure that we shut down the trade so that now everything's more expensive. We literally made the black market as lucrative as we possibly could, and then gave gangbangers recruits, and then wonder why it didn't work. Then we made sure with the lockdowns that people who were already in trouble, homeless, actually couldn't get help now, and people who needed help who had addiction problems now couldn't get help either. So if you didn't have a mental illness and you were homeless, now you got both. If you weren't homeless, you had a mental illness, now you have both. That's where our crime comes from. Now, bail reform. The number one thing with bail reform is we should worry about first-time offenders. That is a first-time simple fix. Why? All the people who are out there right now committing these crimes, they're all multiple repeat offenders. If you're a multiple repeat offender, go back in jail. Done. That's it. You're a multiple offender. Back in jail. You had one mistake. Give one guy a benefit of the doubt. The people who are making the crimes doing this are not people who are first-time offenders. They're all multiple offenders. That should be the change. But more than that, we should be mad at the judges, because the judges know that there are some people who are absolutely violent and should not be on the streets, and they let them go. And their excuse, which is a BS excuse, is, well, you know, my hands are tied. That is absolutely a lie. Judges have to interpret the law. What would have happened if some judge said, wait a minute, this guy is clearly going to go beat up his girlfriend or go shoot somebody, or he's clearly a problem. Let's keep him in jail. What would have happened to that judge? Nothing. Judges in New York State are demigods. Nothing would have happened to them whatsoever. They simply would have said not to do it. It would have gone to the appellate courts and probably would have fixed bail reform via judgments, which would have actually fixed bail reform without having to go back to the Congress. So we could have fixed bail reform. But then how do I face crime now? Again, first-time offenders get the bail reform benefit. Multiple people do not. And now let people work. End this silly licensing from the state and allow it to be credentialed. Stop punishing small business from opening. Allow cannabis and Bitcoin and all the cool things to be sold immediately right now. No $250,000 licensing, none of that. Let people work. If people are working and people are going to school on a purpose, they don't have time to be shooting people. It's that simple. It is literally it's a math problem. If you look at prohibition in the past, when we ended prohibition, there was less crime. That's what happened. Let people work, change bail reform.
Okay. I know we can move on to the next topic, but I don't know. I'm so annoyed that you guys weren't on the debate with Zeldin and Hochul.
You should be
I'm
annoyed.
still mad. I'm still mad about it.
Yes.
Okay.
Good.
We are
This is
too.
like
I think I
this
just
is
want to
already
say
so fun. I'm having a blast.
this is the 4-year anniversary of the debate that you were in at St. Rose, where Cuomo did not show up.
That's correct.
Wow.
Last time, 2018, we were there and Cuomo did not show. That's correct.
And where is he now? Who knows? All right. The next topic we will address will be rent and housing. I mean, I'm somebody who knows almost nothing, but I was very shocked to see that rent did not go down during the pandemic. It went up
Yeah.
in many cases, which if you're trying to keep people in New York, especially the city, to me seems just dumb. And again, I don't know really how it all works, but that was shocking to me. And I guess I just want to know each of your thoughts on how you would help with the whole rent and housing situation. Starting with Larry.
Sure. Well, there are some issues people don't know about rent in New York City specifically. It does happen across the country, but sometimes when people are buying buildings, the banks make rules and regulations based upon what rents they must charge. So if they don't charge certain amounts of rent, certain percentage or rent, then what winds up happening is their monthly note goes up. They actually have a higher percentage they have to pay on their mortgage. So the first thing is what every libertarian is going to say: get government out of that. That's for sure. Let's make sure that these people are having separate issues, separate things like that, and change how we're forcing people to mortgage large buildings. Number one, that's for the larger buildings. Now, smaller buildings and more smaller houses for people who are not really wealthy. What we should be doing is incentivizing people to do rent-to-own, small, cheap housing. And we don't do that at all. What we do instead is say, well, we have to have more public housing. Public housing in New York City and across the state is a disaster. It is terrible. And people are being literally dying from mold and rats, and it's a disaster. Instead, allow private companies to purchase these buildings and it go rent to own. Well, why would a private company do that? Here's why. When they sell the company in New York City, what we should do is say no capital gains tax on that whatsoever. Now, of course, you'll say, wait a minute, Larry, then these big companies, they aren't paying taxes. I don't care. They're giving my people homes. They're creating rent-to-home situations where people are going to start having homes and having ownership. Don't pay your taxes. Give people homes instead, and everybody makes money. This is a way of incentivizing the private sector to step in, because here's what I'm sure of. The private sector, specifically nonprofits, does housing far better than the government does. The government housing is terrible.
And Howie, your rebuttal on this?
Yeah, I have the opposite point of view. We're in a seller's market and there's not enough affordable housing. That's why rents are so high. And we've had incentives of all kinds for private developers and landlords, and they haven't produced affordable housing. It's more expensive per unit to build it with incentives for private developers than to build it at cost through the public sector. Now, New York City public housing has been underinvested in, a lot of corruption, and that is a problem. But public housing, if you look around the world, you know, in the United States, public housing is less than 1% of the units. In most West European countries, it's it's usually over 20%. In the city of Vienna, it's 60%. They don't have problems in their public housing because anybody can go into public housing. Rent is scaled to income. You have mixed income. You don't have the segregation. Our public housing was designed to segregate poor people of color away from the rest of society, jobs, you know, in the worst parts of town. So we got to do public housing better. As immediate relief, and there's a real problem now, I support the Good Cause Eviction Act, which would require landlords to have good cause to evict somebody. You know, they did something wrong, violated the lease, not just they want them out so they can jack up the rents and gentrify. It would also cap rent increases at 3% or 1.5 times the rise in the consumer price index, whichever is higher. So it would keep up with inflation. And in rent control, I mean, it's available to any municipality in the state now, and more of them should use it. But those are short-term solutions. I think the larger-term solution is social housing. They call it that for state programs because there's a cap on public housing at the federal level, thanks to, among other people, Andrew Cuomo, when he was HUD secretary, and they passed the Faircloth Amendment. So we should build social housing in the state, public housing in the state, build it quality, human scale, mixed income, and build it up till it's sufficient to be an important part of the market so that affordable housing forces the private sector to compete with those rents. And then affordable housing will be available to everybody.
Let me rebut if I could for a second.
Rebut.
I am the cool rebut. Yes. I do understand completely what Howie's saying. I do, but I want to be clear on this. If we actually have more private companies building out rent to own facilities where specifically are made for people who don't make much money, and the goal is the person must pay 1/3 of their income, which means by default it's scaled. If you want to be in public housing, you may. The only thing you have to do is agree to pay 1/3 of your income. If you go, I make too much money, then don't go into public housing. It's up to you. That should be the way that you go into public housing. 1/3 of your income. If you like that, go into public housing. If you don't do it. I think that's the key issue with that. The second piece is gentrification. If people are owning their homes, they don't mind gentrification. Gentrification only bothers people who are renters. If you own the home, you're happy to have your gentrification. That's a good thing for you. So I think if we do that, you'll have more. Now, the last piece I bring up is the incentives we bring up for people to for private companies to build public housing is still controlled by government. That's why it's corrupt. Just let them build it, and if they do the right thing, then they get the benefit.
If you build it, they will come. It sounds like you're saying.
There we go.
We actually got a good question from someone, from one of the viewers, from Hunter Vokit, wondering how Larry and Howie would individually address the issue of transportation in New York State, roads, traffic, etc. Not sure who wants to start this first.
Howie, you want to grab that? You want me to?
I think it's my turn to go first. Well, I think there needs to be a lot more public investment in public transportation. Are there good reasons to make it convenient and more affordable than having your own private vehicle for environmental reasons and economic reasons? You don't need an individual vehicle for routine travel to school, work, or shopping. If we design the system right, I think that means a massive expansion of rails. In this country 100 years ago, you could get on what they called, what did they call them? There were rails between the cities. They were smaller gauge than the big rail. And for very low income, working class people could go all over the state. We need to rebuild that. And then in the metropolitan areas in particular, but also the rural areas, there needs to be convenient public transportation. So I think and that will reduce traffic. I see that in the question. You build more roads for private individuals, the history's been you get more traffic and you get more traffic congestion. So I think an emphasis on public transportation, particularly rebuilding our rail systems.
I think we do have to rebuild. I think it's true, but I think government has only done a bad job of it. I've seen nothing but failure upon failure upon failure. The way we decide to fix, say, for example, New York City as an example, is right now at night, half the trains don't even run. So instead, every other train should be actually a freight train. We should allow freight to come into New York City. Freight will come into New York City. Companies like the Amazons of the world, the Googles of the world, the Home Depots of the world can bring their freight into the city via freight trains. And the problem, of course, is the lines aren't meant for that. I'm aware of that. So what must they do? They must rebuild it, which is good. As long as we allow them to have specialized tracks for them to come in, they can have naming rights on the hubs, all those cool things, and preferred treatment for the next 20 years. We will have companies like Home Depot and Amazon and Google and all those places. They will literally rebuild the MTA for free. Michael, that'll cost billions of dollars. I know. Amazon's marketing budget's $10 billion a year. No problem. They'll build it, and they'll build it faster because government won't be involved. They won't put up with garbage. They'll build it. It'll be cheaper. We'll have a better new system without extra taxation and cheaper. But I'm not done. We should be sponsoring our infrastructure. Why in the world do we have a RFK bridge or a Andrew Cuomo bridge or Mario Cuomo bridge? We should have a Pepsi bridge and a Google bridge and a 3M bridge. Sponsor the bridges, front load it to make sure that we get the money up front. We still own the bridge. We just have a very, very simple naming right lease. And then all of a sudden, then Now you see money coming in. We can get rid of tolls. The working class don't have to pay tolls anymore. People who are owner-operated trucks don't pay tolls anymore. We have actually better, stronger bridges, better infrastructure, and not having to raise the burden of taxes on the average New Yorker.
Okay.
I would like the Pepsi bridge too.
Pepsi bridge. There we go.
They could give out drinks. Why not?
I will point out, Howie, I think what the term you were looking for was interurban railways. And
Thank you.
For people who haven't heard of them or don't know the history of them, it's absolutely fascinating. So it's worth taking a look. But my question to both of you is about another topic that's been in the news, at least since June, the question of abortion and abortion rights. So I'd like to hear what both of you would do as governor concerning abortion rights and your views on abortion in the United States and in New York State. So I believe you went first, Howie, last time. So Larry, if you would go.
Sure. I'm someone who does not want to outlaw abortion because all it does is punish poor women. We see that everywhere across the world. It just punishes poor women. Do I want abortion to be safe? Yes. Do I want it to be legal? Yes. But I also want it to be rare, which we've somehow lost. Now all of a sudden it's safe and legal and accessible. I want it safe and legal and rare. How do I do that? Our best defense against abortion is women choosing not to have abortions. How do we do that? By making a better environment for women, that women decide that, hey, you know what? I actually want to take this baby to term. There are 3 ways to do that. Or by not getting pregnant in the first place. 1, by having over-the-counter contraception. Very easy, simple for women to get. 2, by making surrogacy not only legal, but also easy and simple so that people now who find themselves who are pregnant, if a woman does, she can say to herself, you know what? There's a family here in New York that would actually take my baby once I have the baby, take it to term. And lastly, making adoption easy and simple and legal. None of those things are true. It's all difficult to do, hard and expensive. We make all those things easier and we support women. And the last piece I'll bring up is we have a special program that comes from a fund that is paid for not by taxpayer dollars. That's right. I am a libertarian. No taxpayer dollars. Not paid for by taxpayer dollars. That will actually support women with at least a baseline income so that if a woman is on her own and finds herself pregnant, she's a chance of being able to work her way out of that if she chooses to.
Howie?
Yeah, well, New York has codified in the law the rights under the Roe decision, which is good. We can make that stronger by putting it in the New York Constitution, which the Democrats in the legislature said they would do last session, and they did not. And that refers to the Equality Amendment, which would not only make access to abortion and choice about pregnancy outcomes free and access to reproductive care, including abortion, available without discrimination. It would also end discrimination based on sex, national origin, and ethnicity, disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. And that is something that I think the majority of New Yorkers pass, and I just don't know why the legislature couldn't get it done. It just didn't seem to be a priority, and it should be.
I want to do a quick rebut on that. It's not really a but. I'm going to emphasize what Howie just said. The reality of it is they don't want to fix it, Howie. That's why they didn't, because they want to make sure that these issues are always on the ballot. They want to make sure that abortion's on the ballot. They want to make sure that the border's on the ballot. They don't fix any of these things because they want to make sure it stays on the ballot. It is an issue for us to fight over. And guys like me and you trying to have an actual answer, they don't want to hear. They want to make sure they can yell at each other and say, I'm more or less pro-life or pro-abortion than the other guy. And that's the reason why.
Wow. Okay. Did you have questions that each of you wanted to ask each other, or is this something that I should be setting up here? I'm just looking at our email. Let's see. There was a question, I guess, from the Hochul Zeldin debate. Zeldin asked Hochul about Hochul's pay to play corruption. Is that something the two of you wanted to address at all?
Yeah.
My turn? Or?
Okay, let's start with Howie.
Go ahead, Howie, please.
Yeah, she does it routinely. It's a habit. Start with the second Buffalo billion for the billionaire owner of the Buffalo Bills, who has enough collateral. He could have borrowed everything he needed to rebuild that stadium. But he went to the state for subsidies anyway. And Hochul gave it to him. It so happens that her husband has concessions in the stadium and interests in casinos around the stadium. So that's corrupt. It's benefiting her own family. Plus, she basically raided a fund that the Seneca Nation had in escrow in order to negotiate some issues they have with the state. And she just grabbed that money and gave it to this billionaire. So a lot of problems there. She gave $1.2 billion, or is in the process of giving it to a developer named Stephen Roth, who's ruining the neighborhood around Penn Station, destroying thousands of jobs, businesses, and residences in order to build 10 high-rise office buildings when there's excess capacity for office buildings in New York City. But of course, he gave her the maximum $69,700. And then there's the case of the Tebele family. I'm not sure I pronounced it right. They gave over $300,000 to Hochul's campaign. And in return, they got a $637 million contract to provide home COVID-19 test kits at a cost 45% higher than California did, where they did competitive bidding. And just one more case in my city. There's a company here, Medical Answering Services, gave Hochul $54,000 on top of, $81,000, $30,000 to the State Democratic Committee, on top of previously giving her $54,000, and Cuomo, who appointed her, $236,000. In return for those hundreds of thousands of dollars, they've got a over $5 billion contract over the next 5 years to provide transportation services for Medicaid patients. So it's pay to play. For hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations, you get hundreds of millions or billions in contracts. It may be technically legal, but it's really legalized bribery.
100%. Look, the reality of it is, when it comes to places like the Buffalo Bills, if you know Western New York at all, Western New York loves the Buffalo Bills. And I mean loves the Buffalo Bills. Literally, as you're walking around out there, they'll say, "Go Bills," as a greeting in the morning, like good morning. That they go Bills, go Bills. That's how much I love the Bills. It's a 2 million metro person area, and the Buffalo Bills have a buffalo on their helmet. They're not going anywhere. They were never going to go anywhere. And in fact, now that I have this $2 million person area, I've got all the people who love you. They're going to buy your t-shirts. They're going to show up. I should be saying, not how much am I going to pay you? How much are you going to pay me? That's what I should be saying. But the reason why she didn't wasn't because she loves you or loves us or anything like that. Wasn't because she negotiated hard or she was afraid of losing the Bills. She did it for exactly what Howie said. She wants to control who gets the jobs. So the more hundreds of millions of dollars she has, the more she's able to give these jobs out. And so now she gives out jobs, and as she gives out jobs, she gains by default both cash and also she gains votes. As these people keep saying, you got to vote for Kathy Hochul. She's the one giving us these jobs. You got to make sure Kathy Hochul so that we can get our job. We got to make these jobs this year. That's why she does this stuff. And sadly, to Howie's point, I'm just reiterating, to Howie's point, it's 100% correct. It is, without question, it is legal, and it is absolutely immoral, unethical. We should stop it without a doubt. We have to start taking what we have in New York, the glory that is New York State. And New York State is absolutely beautiful and wonderful and diverse in everything you can imagine, and realizing how valuable it is and saying, you want a piece of this? Awesome. Cost you some cash, brother. You don't get this for free. I'm not paying you. You got to start paying us. And as we start making money, we can lower the tax burden on every other New Yorker, because as one of the things I mentioned, affordability is key. If too many people can't afford to live here, they move. Literally, our families are being broken up. I don't want this to happen anymore. Lower the tax burden, get them to pay us.
Let me just respond and add a little bit. I'm not so sure this Buffalo Bills owner wouldn't be a runaway shop. I mean, we've had that for a long time. And a lot of these NFL teams move from smaller markets like Buffalo to bigger markets. Mm-hmm. The example that didn't, and this is a socialist solution, is the Green Bay Packers. It's community owned.
It's true.
The people of Green Bay are the only people that can have voting shares. And that small city, I think it's like 50, 60,000, has an NFL franchise because the people own it and they support it. You know, they have real good fan base. So I would say if we're going to put public money forward, and this goes across the board on any time we want to incentivize businesses with tax breaks or subsidies. We should take an equity position and share ownership as New York State, the public. So we have a say. And in the case of the Buffalo Bills, we can say, you got to stay here.
Yeah.
I think I might actually agree with that one, Hal. I think you got me on that one. I like that. I like that.
Right?
If we're gonna write them checks, we got to get a cut. I'm with you.
Sure. My question is about climate and energy policy. We know that the news coming from the IPCC is not good in terms of the climate crisis, that nations seem to be heading catastrophically above the 2C that scientists say we need to stay below in order to avoid the worst of the climate catastrophe. And we know the Biden administration keeps handing out oil and gas drilling permits. So the federal government doesn't seem to want to address this crisis the way that it might. I'm curious what your climate and energy policy would be here in New York State if you were governor, and how you might orient that towards what's going on in the rest of the world with the environment. So, Larry, I think you're first now.
I'll touch three pieces: fracking, nuclear energy, and environmental damage. Fracking. I don't think a state government should be deciding whether or not local people frack or not. I think there's about 13 or 14, if not mistaken, counties in New York State who could frack if they wanted to. Most of them don't want to, so I don't think fracking is viable in New York State because most of the counties don't want to do it anyway. But I just don't think, on principle, the governor should be deciding whether that happens or not. If there is to be fracking in New York State, then it has to be 100% completely transparent. It has not been in the past. They've hidden behind intellectual property and lied and covered things up. That can't happen. If we are to let fracking happen in New York State, it must be 100% transparent, and all the people who agree have to agree, and we can do it county by county if we do that. But it's not a big deal for me. I just want to bring it up because people talk about it for energy. The number one thing for energy, nuclear energy. Gen 4 energy is critical. It is the answer for now without question. It's an immediate answer. As governor of New York, we should begin to build 3 nuclear power plants, Gen 4, which literally cannot, it is impossible for them to melt down. And they actually use spent fuel rods as fuel. So no new fuel. It's the same old fuel. We're using that right now. We can get those built in the North Country in New York. There's not a NIMBY issue either because many people want that, and we can lease out the federal land to make some extra cash. So private power companies can build it. We lease out the dollars. Why 3? 3 separate grids, which protect us from environmental terrorism and being hacked if we have to, with 3 separate grids. In addition, we can sell energy from one of those instead of buying it right now from Canada and buying it from Pennsylvania. We sell it instead, and then we make some cash, which goes into that fund I talked about earlier, which then, of course, pays for education and such, as I mentioned earlier, those types of things, and for the other programs I discussed. And on top of that, we now can feel free with any type of blockchain mining because we'd have energy and lots of cheap energy, clean energy. We actually wouldn't have to worry about blockchain mining. We could actually encourage it here in New York State. And lastly, it will take at least 4 to 5 years to build it, but we just do it. And someone just mentioned leasing out federal land. I apologize. I made an error. It's state land. We'd be leasing out state land, not federal land. My mistake. So thank you for that clarity for someone. So I think that is my answer when it comes to the energy. And lastly, we need to have what's called an EVU. It's an Environmental Victims Unit in the DEC. We do not have that now. What does that mean? Right now, when somebody makes has a horrible environmental problem or affects people from the environment, there's no way of getting around. The EPA actually protects them. The EPA says, no, your maximum is X, and that's all you can pay, and now we protect you, and we have tons of sites all over New York State which are collapsing. But instead, we should actually have an EVU, an Environmental Victims Unit, a unit within the DEC that puts together an actual case against the individuals in the organizations who made the decisions. What does that mean? It breaks the corporate veil, gets the individuals who made the decisions. They can't hide behind corporations. That is how we actually make it happen. Right now, most AGs have no idea how to produce that kind of case. The EBU presents them with a case, and all of a sudden now people are sitting in boardrooms making terrible decisions. And now someone's going to say, do you want to do this in New York State? If you made a decision, man, they might come after you personally. Oh, they might? Wow, maybe I shouldn't do that anymore. There's nothing wrong and nothing unlibertarian about personal responsibility. If you are a board member and you're making decisions that are hurting people, you should pay the price for that.
And this is kind of relevant to both what will be both of your answers on this. From Marshall Beaupre, gas $3 a gallon in Florida yesterday, still too high, while New York is $4 a gallon today. Should I get used to paying this? What can a New York governor do to lower this? I don't know if you feel like you addressed that, Larry, or if we should move on to Howie.
I'll do a quick answer, and then obviously then Howie has many things to answer. It is difficult for us to do much about gas in New York State. The best thing we can do is incentivize gas station owners with some kind of discount and see if they can lower the price. It's difficult. A lot of gas is federal issues. It's very challenging, but we can, if we want to, begin to lower the taxation on gases, which would drop it a bit. But to be forward, if we actually make tolls cheaper across New York State, that is a better way of kind of helping out the driver in New York State.
Okay.
Howie, go ahead.
Okay, well, I'll start by responding to some of the things Larry said. On the gas, they got a moratorium on the gas tax. That's a dime or two off your gas. It's really not a real answer. If we want to do something to really help people, we should have a public fuel corporation buy the fuels wholesale at the state level, distribute them to retailers with a limit on how much they can mark up. That would really have an impact on the prices in the short term. Fracking, it's not a local issue because it's greenhouse gas emissions going into the atmosphere that we all breathe. So you can't just have local communities dumping pollutants into the environment that are heating the planet. Nuclear, these fourth generation so-called nuclear power plants, some of those technologies they've been working on since the 1940s and 1950s. They haven't worked. And when they talk about smaller scale, they're losing economies of scale. And the time to build them, they always say, what they say, but then it's usually double or triple that time, as we've seen in recent cases in Georgia and South Carolina. And why pay more for power when solar and wind and storage is cheaper? So I think that's a dead end. And crypto, even if it's done, or blockchain, if it's done by renewable energy, that's a waste of the renewable energy we need to electrify transportation powered by renewable energy, to redo the heating and cooling of our buildings, produce power by renewable sources, and then transform industry that uses fossil fuels. So things like green hydrogen, where you need high heating processes, like in the production of steel and chemicals. So I don't think those are answers. What we've been talking about, as I said, since 2010 is a Green New Deal. And that involves, we call it an eco-socialist Green New Deal now to distinguish ourselves from the corporate welfare that Democrats are putting out there. They put out incentives to encourage renewable energy and other things, but they're relying on the independent decisions of hundreds of corporations who are looking out after their bottom line. And this is a complicated transition. It requires a public plan, democratic control, and coordination to do it. So we want, public power in the utility industry. There were bills that didn't pass in the legislature for a Build Public Renewables Act that would have enabled the New York Power Authority to build and own renewable energy generation. New York Utility Democracy Act, which would have turned the utility industry, which is a natural monopoly, into a publicly owned system, accountable to the people, with a mandate to focus on renewable energy. There's an all-electric buildings act that would have ended fossil fuel heating and cooling systems in new construction, up to 6 floors by 2024 and all buildings by 2027. Didn't pass. Clean Futures Act would have stopped new fossil fuel generation. And there were a dozen bills. I'm not going to list them all, but the one thing I'll say is that, we had a bill that would implement the Green New Deal called off fossil fuels. And instead, the legislature adopted a compromise with Cuomo called the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. And that passed in 2019. They haven't funded it. They haven't got the studies done on time. They're not serious. So, we need a governor that's serious about really dealing with this climate emergency. And the last thing I'll say is, some people say, well, you do it in New York and nobody else will. New York is the 11th largest economy in the world if it was a nation. What we do matters. And a Green New Deal would create lots of jobs, be great for the economy, and it would show people the benefits of it. It would be a great example, and I think would have influence across the country and across the world.
Howie, I
let
like
me
that.
let me let me rebut if I could. Yeah, you're right about government not doing anything. That's why I don't want them building stuff, right? That's why I don't want them building stuff. As government tries to build nuclear power plants, it fails. As government builds roads, it does it terribly. It takes double, triple the time. But the people who don't make that happen are the private companies who seem to build them out a whole lot faster, a whole lot better. I'm not saying that government builds any of this. I'm saying government leases out the land for private companies to build it out. If they spend a bunch of money, it's their money, not ours. Without current system on the government building it, when the government makes a mistake and screws something up, what happens? We just pay more. But if some company's building it and they screw up, then they're paying more. I'm tired of all these failures and ideas that we have falling back on the backs of the average New York taxpayer, failing miserably. We pay more, we get nothing in return, if not, or something crappy in return, and then people pack up and leave. We've got to stop this. Whatever we do, it can't involve more and more government spending. It can't involve more and more government this or that. It just doesn't work. You're right, Howie. They didn't take it seriously, and they never will. They have no incentive to take it seriously, so they won't.
It's kind of depressing, Larry.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Well, I'm libertarian.
I know this is a concern on the minds of a lot of parents in New York State, and that is the idea of requiring the COVID vaccine on school kids who it just doesn't. It's frustrating because it doesn't seem like there's actual science to support this. I want to know both of your opinions on this and what you would do as governor, and we'll start with Howie.
Well, there is actual science to support it. The advisory board to the CDC recommended about 10 days ago that the CDC put the COVID vaccines in the vaccine schedule for school children. And I would follow the advice of public health officials, like we do for polio and measles and hepatitis B and tetanus and other things that school children are required to take to get into school. And if that's what the public health officials recommend, I think we should follow their advice.
Okay, Larry.
I don't mind with the CDC giving any type of advice it wants to give. My problem is mandates. That's my issue. If you think that vaccines are good for you or your family or whatever it is, good for you. Good for you. You should do what you feel is appropriate for your health and your family's health. No mandates. No, I'm not there. What's happened with COVID is it's changed the definition of vaccine. Now it's a treatment. So now it's a treatment. It's not a vaccine. You still get COVID. It's not a vaccine. It is a treatment. And treatments should never, ever be mandated. But it's a second piece. We need to change how we do education so that people can, if they want to, have a religious exemption if they want to. I know people say religious exemptions, they're terrible ideas. Whether you think it's a terrible idea or not, the First Amendment is not just freedom of speech, it's also freedom of association, freedom of the press, and also freedom of religion. So if you want to use your religious exemption to not get that, you should be able to, but that means maybe you can't go to a public school. I'm okay with that as long as we support clearly, openly, private schools and homeschools. And we don't do that. So we've got to make sure we're supporting homeschooling, supporting private schooling, so that people can do as they see fit. I am not against vaccines. I'm not against any of those things. I am against the mandate. That is not the right answer. It should not be true. And your religious exemption should matter.
And this is a related super chat, and we'll bring Howie back in to answer it as well, just because it's related. What's your opinion of religious freedom, and how far should that go under the law? Do you believe churches should be taxed?
I think religious freedom is fine as long as it isn't imposing on other people. Like vaccine mandates. I mean, we basically eradicated polio until now some people are not getting their vaccines and we got polio returning. So it's not just, affecting yourself or your family, it's affecting all of us. So that's a public issue and we need a public policy for it. Taxing churches, I think particularly, some of these big churches have lots of property, they rent it, they make a lot of money. They shouldn't be freeloading off the rest of us. They should pay their fair share to support the public infrastructure and services that we all use.
Okay. On the church piece, I'm going to agree with Howie. You have a freedom of religion. Absolutely. It doesn't mean you have freedom from taxation. Look, I don't want anybody to be taxed. So I would like us all to be churches and then none of us get taxed. That would be fine. I would love that. But if we're going to tax people, you got to tax churches too. You tax everybody or tax nobody. That's the way it should work. It's unfair that they get to be taxed. I'd rather nobody be taxed. That would be my ultimate goal if I could do that. But if I can't do that, then everyone gets to pay taxes. They're still using the fire department and the police department and the property tax. No, yes, it's everybody or nobody. And I prefer nobody.
I think we should all start a church. Okay.
I'd like to ask a kind of a corollary question to the vaccine. One thing that we've seen over the last 2.5 years is a question about public health. So I'd like to ask a question about your healthcare policy. We know that in the last 2.5 years that it was easier for many people to get access to care because of government funding and because of government provision of healthcare. And I'm curious, given that we've kind of gone back to a pre-pandemic state where healthcare is something of a mess and a mishmash of private and some public provision, and the single-payer bill that was in the legislature, it seems to continually stall, even though the Democrats say they want to pass it, but they never do. What would your administration pursue in terms of healthcare for New Yorkers? And I believe, Howie, you're first on this one.
Yeah, we would enact sign the New York Health Act if the Democrats would get off their bottoms and pass it through committee like they promised to do when they got majority control and then super majority control of the New York State Senate. I kind of agree with Larry. They want to keep it an issue that they can campaign on rather than really solve the problem. And I would say that should just be the first step to provide universal care, because social insurance, so that the services are paid for, made sense, but it's becoming less and less sensible now because the delivery system is being corporatized and centralized. We're talking about pharmacies, clinics, hospices, nursing homes, urgent care and dialysis clinics, imaging facilities, ambulance companies, home care agencies. They're becoming, giant monopolies, and they stand between the patient and the doctor, and they extract costs. So it's really a time, I think, that we should move toward a fully socialized system, a national or a state level health service, like countries like Britain and Costa Rica have, and get those middlemen out and make them accountable to the public through publicly elected health boards that federate at the state level to coordinate the overall system. Healthcare should be a right. It's a public good. It affects all of us. It shouldn't be a pay or die commodity, which is what it is now. And the mixed system of private and public insurance is much more expensive. 30% of the healthcare dollar is wasted on bureaucracy because doctors and hospitals are fighting with the insurance companies who are denying treatments and reimbursements. All this paperwork is going back and forth. It's a big waste. In Canada, where they have a single payer system, they spend half as much healthcare per capita as we do, and have a system that covers everybody. We need to move in that direction.
Well, let me first bring up the idea of it becoming a right. Oh my God, no. Why would I say, oh my God, no? Because every time we make it a right, we think we make it better. We don't. We just make it more expensive. And the example I'll give you is education. Education in New York State is a right. And we spend the most in the entire nation, over $29,000 per kid, and we rank around 44th out of 51 because they count DC. So it has become worse and more expensive once we made it a right. So you do that, oh my God, that's going to make things totally worse. What you see right now in healthcare in New York State is a division, two-tiered system. I live in New York City. The wealthy people go to private doctors. Everyone else gets stuck in managed care. That's what's happening right now. So that's happening more and more. So when wealthy people always say, they always do, Medicare for all. They don't mean Medicare for all. They mean Medicare for them. They're going to keep their private doctors. That's what they're going to keep doing. They're going to go to some doctor who is going to sit there and put 15 people in 1 hour and see them for 5 minutes. At the end, this system we have now, at the end of every time you see a doctor, there's either a prescription, a test, or some type of procedure. Why? That's how they get paid. It's basically a break-fix model like the old IT used to be for our healthcare. What a terrible idea. Instead, we should have it to where you pay a flat fee every month, or you just write, if you're wealthy, you're just going to write a check anyway. And that's how that works. Why don't we instead allow to support more privatized systems where people just pay monthly? There's systems now where you can pay $150 per month to get good, solid healthcare. Show up whenever you want. And their goal is for you to be healthy so you don't show up. That's their goal. Like a gym, right? A gym wants you to already be healthy already, right? So you don't have to come to the gym anymore. They make money that way. That's how doctors should work. And that actually does work across, you see it in America for most people who are middle class or above. You start seeing them start to do that. That's what I want to achieve. How do we start that? Number one, the actuaries already know how much money you're going to spend, give or take, every given year. Put that literally on a debit card. You're going to drop about $3,000 a year, $1,000 a year, whatever you want per year. Awesome. Go to any place you want. But Larry, what if they run out? You still fall back to Medicare or Medicaid or whatever you got. You still fall back to that. But now I got a chance to get the cool doctors that all the rich people get. When the cool doctors see that, and to Howie's point, they realize, so I can get this money without having to go through all the problems. Yeah, you have to no fight insurance companies, nothing. You just get your cash. They will lower their prices. How do I know that? Because there is a secondary healthcare market right next to the primary healthcare market, and that is non-essentials. LASIK eye surgery, body piercings, body enhancements, cosmetic dentistry. And in every single case, the price has gone down, accessibility has gone up, and service has gotten better for the average American and even people who are actually in a bad spot. Now, you keep Medicare for catastrophic issues, of course, but daily, we should be letting everybody have the cool doctors. And that's how you fix it in New York State.
That is true, because I do want to get a Brazilian butt lift. Okay.
See that? We got to get butt lifts. That's what I want.
We can all have them.
Well, see, in my plan, we all get Brazilian butt lifts. Not a bad deal. Come on, Howie. Let's go get it together.
Let's go, Howie.
Yeah, well, a public healthcare system, those discretionary things would not be part of medically necessary services. So that market would still be there. But for basic medically necessary services, that should be something that you show up to the doctor and you get served, and then they go to the single payer system and they get reimbursed for their service. And that's simple, little paperwork, and it's less expensive. I mean, we got that data from all over the world.
A question I've seen in the chat, which is a concern, which is crypto. Your thoughts on signing the crypto mining moratorium? I forget who went first.
I think it would be Larry.
It's Larry's
Sure.
turn. Okay.
Yeah. 100% no. My goal is to actually get it to the worry what they're worried about, which is a valid concern. To be forward, this is not a crazy concern. The concern is certain types of crypto mining are really energy intense, right? That's true. This is why I want to get cheaper energy. If we have cheaper energy, particularly nuclear power, as I mentioned before, now I don't care anymore. So I don't want a moratorium whatsoever. Let people blockchain mine as much as they see fit. It's not the government's job to decide what energy should go to or whether you should do blockchain mining or not. That's not the governor's decision. That's you out there doing what you think is appropriate in your world. We need to have cheap, abundant energy so that New Yorkers can do what they think is right the way they want it to work. That's what we have to worry about. That's what's far more important. So no.
Well, there is a partial moratorium on crypto mining bill that passed, and Governor Hochul has not signed. And I would sign that bill, although it's got problems. It has loopholes. For example, the Greenridge crypto mining plant on Seneca Lake using fossil fuels. It got grandfathered in. It's only a 3-year moratorium. And all this energy spent on crypto mining, even if it comes from renewables, it should be used for other purposes, transforming transportation in our buildings and our industries so that we go to 100% clean energy as fast as possible. So, crypto mining, and I don't know how long it's going to last. It's kind of a bubble that's bursting. But the energy issue means that, I would support that bill. And in fact, the Green Party just wants to ban crypto mining in New York. It's a waste of energy.
So I have a question, and I think it's relevant to why we're here tonight. I wonder if you could address fair ballot access, including things like ranked choice voting or proportional representation, and your stance on those. I think, Howie, you would go first.
Sure. First of all, we got to get a fair ballot access law, something reasonable. I mean, what New York had before was pretty hard. I've looked around the world to find a bill as hard as what we got now, or a petition, 45,000 signatures in 42 days. The closest I could find was if you want to run as an independent for the State Duma in Russia, it's 15,000 signatures in 45 days. That was 3 days more than we had under the old standard. And when we've talked to legislators about going back to the old standard, I joke, we just want to go back to the Putin standard. And the legislators and their staff kind of laugh, nervously chuckle, and say, you're right. But they didn't want to introduce it before this election. I guess they didn't want Hochul and the state Democratic chair, Jay Jacobs, on their back. But that's the least we could do. We could actually have a model bill, like a lot of other states. You get a ballot line, your party's recognized when you have a minimum number of registered voters in the party. Or you get the minimum number of votes for any statewide office, not just governor, which is what we had before. Now it's governor and president. Those would all improve it. So that's one thing we need to fight for. But we have to recognize that what we have now is an exclusionary electoral system. Single member district, winner take all. Most districts are gerrymandered, so they're one-party districts. The elections are farces. You can vote and vote and vote. And if you're a Democrat in a majority Republican district, a Republican in a majority Democratic district, or a Green or a Libertarian, you can vote and vote and vote, and you'll never get somebody to represent you. Most democracies in the world are proportional representation. And we could do that in New York by having ranked choice voting for multi-member districts. And then every party would get their fair and proportional share of representation in the legislature. And we'd have a multi-party system. And it would be much more positive. Larry and I would agree on some things, Greens and Libertarians, like on corporate welfare and drug policy reform. And we'll disagree on other things like healthcare, and he'll align with the Republicans and I'll align with the progressive Democrats. But you'll have shifting coalitions. Then it doesn't pay to go negative. It just pays to go positive with your own program, both in the election and in the legislature. So there are a lot of benefits to this system. And then having ranked choice voting for single seat offices that are inherently so, like governor, attorney general, comptroller, senators, and president, you get rid of the spoiler problem. So you can vote for a Green or a Libertarian without worrying about it helping your worst enemy, which is what we got now with the plurality takes all system. So we need not only fair ballot access, we need ranked choice voting and proportional representation. And then we can have an inclusive multi-party democracy that'll focus on issues and policies instead of this mudslinging contest that we have now, where all you hear about the candidates is what's bad with the other guy.
Mm-hmm. This is Howie. I want to bring this up because this is a relevant question from the chat here. You addressed gerrymandering, but would you support breaking up New York State from New York City for better representation?
We get better representation through proportional representation. I think New York City and the state. I live upstate, and a lot of people think, New York City dominates the politics. Let's cut them loose. But New York State also dominates the revenues to the state. And there's a net transfer from New York City to upstate. So that's kind of shooting yourself in the foot. No, I think we need to figure out a way to live together. And I think these measures toward a multi-party democracy would be how we could do that.
Okay, great.
So let me touch both of those. The first thing I'll touch is the question right there. And my answer to that is localism, Marshall. Localism, localism, localism. I want less money going to the state, more staying locally with you. I want more community locally. I want to support local banks and credit unions. I want to support local co-ops being grown. I want to support everything local like there's no tomorrow. Marshall, if New York City didn't control you, you wouldn't care what happens in New York City. And that's the goal. Let's let Brooklyn be Brooklyn. Let's let Broome County be Broome County. Let's let Onondaga be Onondaga. Let's let Clinton be Clinton. Let's let each county be its own county. And the goal of the state government shouldn't be to control you. The goal of state government should be to defend your rights against the local bully. There will always be a local bully. That's how it works. But right now, the local bully is enforcing the king's will. Who's in Albany. I would rather, in this case, Queen, sorry, Kathy, first of her name. She right now is there. So you're enforcing the Queen's will. I instead would rather us have more localism so that you don't care. I like that Brooklyn is Brooklyn. I like that Wyoming County is Wyoming County. I think that's wonderful. I don't want to change that at all. So now the other pieces, ballot access and such. Again, Howie and I are going to agree on a lot of this. We really are. We've seen it, and many things we do agree upon. I can't tell you how much I'd rather have a better system because, to be forward, Howie's right. There are times when him and I will be on the opposite side. But there's times when him and I are going to be arm in arm fighting together for exactly the same thing. And the way the system works now, we've got to fight each other all the time. It's not the right answer. So 100% he's right. We should have better ballot access and ranked choice voting. What people don't understand, the glory of ranked choice voting is, for those who don't know, you rank your first person that you want first. Then if that person doesn't win, your vote goes to your second vote, right? And if that person doesn't win, goes to third or nobody, if you can vote for nobody if you want to, up to you. So now you get both an offensive and a defensive vote. So you like Larry Sharpe. So you vote for Larry Sharpe, but I can't vote for Larry because if I vote for Larry, then, oh my God, the Democrat's going to win. Great. Vote for Larry Sharpe first and vote for your Republican second. Who cares? If I win, life is good. If I don't win, you're still defending yourself against the evil Democrat or whatever the case may be, right? You can still do that either way, which makes everything a whole lot better. But also, we have to think about open primaries. If we retain gerrymandering, if we do that, then we kind of have to have open primaries, right? If we can break up the gerrymandering, then it's okay. We don't have to have open primaries. But right now, you have a system like I have in New York City where it's 6-1, Democrat to Republican. If you're a Republican, you don't get any say. So you have to have open primaries or you have to ungerrymander the districts, either one of those two things. So we should consider that also. And for ballot access, look, the last thing we had, Howie and I both made, 15,000 signatures is hard, but it's realistic. It means you're not just some crazy guy who, decides he wants to run, but you're someone who has some backing and something across the state. I think going back to the old way for getting on the ballot was fine. I'm okay with that. I'd like it to be even easier because here's the most important piece. There is no harm to letting people on the ballot. If people don't like you, they just don't vote for you. They didn't vote for me and Howie by the millions last time. So they showed us that we can do that. It's okay. So I think the answer is, but the biggest answer here is the reason why they did it now. Many people don't know this, but as of November 9th, New York State is now paying for our elections. So your taxpayer dollars, if you're in New York State, is now going to pay for elections. And some people say that's a great idea. It gets money out of politics. I don't buy that at all. All it does is ensure a grifter class, and it's forced speech. Because now there's only two real parties, Democrat and Republican. And in New York State, there are more people who are not registered with the party than who are registered Republicans. That's how broken the Republican Party is in my state. Literally, there's more people who are other than who are Republican. So all of those people now have to pay for elections in the primaries for parties which they cannot vote in, which is why if you're going to pay for elections, you must have open primaries because I'm paying for an election I can't vote in, and for parties that I can't even say yes to. This is nothing but a bad idea. Either you got to open a system up or you got to end paying for elections.
Let me comment a little bit on primaries. We need to distinguish between open primaries and nonpartisan primaries. Open primaries are where a party says independents can vote in our primary. And you have that right in New York. The Reform Party did it in the New York mayoral race a while back. So I'm all fine with that. What I'm concerned about is there's a push with a lot of rich folks' money behind it to link ranked choice voting to nonpartisan primaries or jungle primaries. They call them top 4, top 5.
Yes,
they have
yes.
top 2 in New York, in California and Washington. And those destroy parties because parties members don't get to decide who their nominees are. Yeah. Anybody can say, I'm a Green and run in that nonpartisan primary, even though the party itself has nominated somebody else. And it confuses voters when they get there. They'll see more than one candidate with the green label. So I think we got to avoid that. Open primaries, we already have as an option of parties in New York. Nonpartisan primaries would be terrible because you need parties as a way for like-minded people to organize and come to common agreement on their platform and organize to advance that. You get rid of that intermediate level of organization between the top of the ticket, the candidates and the voters, and the voters are then atomized, and all they see are these advertisements aimed at pushing their buttons to get them to go one way or another. So parties are important to democracy, and I'm afraid nonpartisan primaries will undermine that. So I think that's something we need to keep in mind.
Okay, great.
Chrissie, can I answer 2 comments real fast?
Yes.
My favorite kind of ice cream is coffee ice cream because I love coffee.
Okay.
Yep, that's what kind I like. That is my favorite. My
Me
second
too.
favorite is
Haagen-Dazs.
Yes,
Okay.
my second favorite is chocolate. And I like the Bills, but I'm not a Bills fan. To be forward with you, I don't want to lie. I don't want to be Hillary Clinton, show up here and put a Yankees hat on and pretend I'm a Yankees fan. I am a Yankees fan and a New York Giants fan. And I hate that the Giants play in Jersey. If I could, as governor, I want to bring them back to New York. So I like the Bills. I like the Bills. I'm a Giants fan. I don't want to lie to you guys. I live in New York City. I'm a Giants fan. And the reason why I'm a Giants fan, by the way, is because when I was a kid in the 70s, for about a year, the Giants played in Yankee Stadium. And I grew up outside of Yankee Stadium in the South Bronx. So I became a Giants fan. There we
Okay. And Howie, your rebuttal on the ice cream question.
Ice cream. I always like vanilla, and I like berry ice creams that have real berries, not just the flavoring. And let me deal with a sports thing. I came up in San Francisco. I went to Kezar Stadium. Nobody knows what that was. That's where the 49ers used to play. I saw Gale Sayers score 6 touchdowns there. Unfortunately, he was a Chicago Bear. Candlestick Park.
I was going to say, yeah.
I used to be able to jump over the cyclone fence and get into the bleachers there when I was a kid. It's faster than the security people, me and a couple of other friends. So I've been a baseball Giants fan, 49ers, and of course, the Oakland Raiders, and now the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Oakland A's. But I have to say, after being in the East for 50 years now, the Bills are winning me over. I mean, Josh Allen is incredible. And so I'm becoming a Bills fan too.
Okay. These are all good answers. Okay. The next real question is having to do with, as we know, tons of immigrants have been shipped to New York City from Texas and from Florida. It seems pretty crazy. I think last month Adams predicted that the migrant population could soon reach 75,000. These shelters are popping up everywhere. It's been declared a state of emergency over the migrant crisis. This is definitely an issue that a lot of folks are concerned with. So I just want to know how each of you would handle it. I think, are we starting with, God, I forget whose turn. Howie? Larry? Let's do Howie.
I can start. I think Larry and I might have a lot of agreement on this. I believe we should have open borders, like the EU had or has, where people can travel freely, cross borders for recreation, shopping, work, residents. They just check in at the border to see if there's a warrant out for their arrest. And open borders will be good for the economies on both sides. The more advanced country often needs labor, and we need that here in the United States, particularly if we're going to do this Green New Deal energy transition. It's going to create so many jobs, a lot of them in construction. And the remittances go back to the poorer side, which is important to their economies. In fact, labor is going to be the bottleneck for making this energy transition. So with the immigrants, I mean, Larry's worried about losing population in New York. Well, now they're sending people here, and I think we should welcome them and help them become integrated into our communities and become assets for our communities. I think we can do that.
So my answer is going to be a little bit more complex. The Libertarian Party stance is absolutely open borders. That's true. I am not an open borders libertarian. Does that mean I want closed borders? No. What I actually want is vibrant, controlled immigration. That is what I want. But I do want controlled immigration. I do want a border. I think it's an important thing. And I think we need to, this is not New York State. This has to be something that's federal in this regard. Federally, we have to build on the border, not a wall, but we have to build 2 Ellis Islands by 2 separate private companies that will welcome immigrants, quarantine them for 30 days or whatever is the right number. I'm making that number up to ensure that the baddies aren't coming, to make sure we document them appropriately, all those things. Because if we do that, then the actual border guards that we have right now can go get bad guys. So there are bad guys that come across the border. that they should be getting the bad guys, but we should have a safe haven for people who want to come in to document them, to make sure they don't have any diseases, all those things. I think we could do that. And then states could voluntarily decide if they want opt in to get people from those places. They'd work just like recruiting centers, right? Recruiting centers to get paid like by recruiters. If they want to give them jobs, they could. As for New York State, I do want to welcome the people coming. They're here. I don't want to be mean to them or hurt them at all. I don't want to at all. I want to be good to them. The reality of it is we should actually be, as on the debate, they said, we should be calling the other governors, right? I should be calling the governors of Florida and Texas saying, dude, what are you doing? Let me know what's happening. How can I fix this? Let's not be jerks to each other. If we want to have more immigrants, let's have them. And here's how we do it. The idea that we wouldn't talk to each other and they would just send immigrants here that makes everything bad is not a good thing. We should not be doing that. We should be helping each other in this situation. I am absolutely pro vibrant legal immigration on a border. I want us to have vibrant immigration. I want us to help people who are here. Of course I do. I'm not a mean person. Of course I want to help them. However, we can do it. The sad part is we have two sides. Open borders, build a wall. I think that's an unnecessary dichotomy. We can actually have vibrant, controlled immigration, and we should be focusing on that more than anything else.
Okay. So my question is on drug policy. New York State recently legalized marijuana. We're finally moving towards having licenses in businesses in the next couple of months. How would your administration pursue things like legal drug injection sites or possible legalization of other types of drugs or decriminalization? And I think, Larry, I think you would go first.
Yep.
This time.
This one's mine. The way we have decriminalized cannabis in New York State is embarrassing. We've made it to where only big business is going to win and farmers are going to lose. We have an office of literally cannabis management. Cannabis has been in the black market for 100 years, and there's no deaths from cannabis. It's not a thing. People dying of cannabis is not a thing. So I do not want that to be the case. We should regulate cannabis like a plant, absolutely, and we should do that first. I know many libertarians want to immediately end all drugs and make them all legal. I don't think New York State's there. I don't think we can do it. I would like that eventually, but I don't think we're there. I think the first thing we do is simply make cannabis a plant. Let farmers grow it, craft grows, let dealers deal it, how they can make money however they want. Wait a couple of years, see how things happen. And here's what I would guess, because I believe it's true. It happens almost any place else. Once you do that, then you will find people will be taking less hard drugs, right? You'll see that will happen. You will see the addiction rate go down, those things. Second piece, we should make all possession not a crime. Possession is not a crime. I don't care what you have. Larry, I have cocaine in my pocket. That's not a crime. Did you rob somebody to get the cocaine? That's a crime. Did you hurt somebody to get the cocaine? That's a crime, right? That is a crime. But as long as you simply have the substance, that is not a crime. And if we can't do that legislatively, we should literally have the office of the pardon. And it should be a blanket pardon from the governor. Any possession charge is not a crime. You should not be charged with a crime because you have a substance. If you did something to get that, it's not a crime. And that, I think if we do that, we'll make everything a whole lot better. I want to make sure cannabis everyone can use it. Now, when it comes to injection sites, a lot of people don't want it in their communities. I'm okay with it being a local vote. I'm okay with that. Personally, I think they're a good idea. I think they will work. I think they can work. But I don't want to put these into communities who don't want them. If you don't want it, vote it. I believe what will happen is that you will see it work. And when you see it work, others will follow. I believe it's a good idea. I think it will work, but I don't want to force people to do it.
Howie?
Yeah, I agree with Larry that the way the marijuana market has been opened up has cut out the little guys.
Yes.
So the regulation needs to be improved so everybody who wants to can participate in that business. I agree that we should release nonviolent drug offenders for possession of any drug. We shouldn't legalize these hard drugs, but we should decriminalize them. So if you possess it, you're not charged. The people pushing things like fentanyl, yeah, that's an issue and that should be enforced. Injection sites save lives. And while I agree with Larry that you got to respect, local decisions about location. They should be available, and also adjacent to them, opportunities to get treatment for addictions, which is a lot of people want to get off these drugs. They just don't. They got to wait to get treated, and they got to get fixed. Getting a fix before they get the treatment, and that might have fentanyl in it and it kills them. We have too many people dying from these opioid addictions, and this fear mongering, war on crime stuff we're getting from particularly Zeldin isn't helping, because these are real lives that are being lost. So I think those are the policies that I would advocate. I'm pretty much in agreement, I think, with Larry on all of them. And these are just common sense and harm reduction. And to not do that, to me, is very mean-spirited and deadly for a lot of people.
Okay.
Chrissie, did you want to ask another question?
Let's see. Should we leave it up to the chat? No, that will take forever.
No, people are talking about Second Amendment.
Yeah, I am seeing a lot of concerns about Second Amendment. I know that was, I'm personally a bit confused on where we're at in terms of Second Amendment in New York. It just seems like it's much less of an issue in other states. So yeah, that's a good thing to address. Let's start with your feelings on the Second Amendment and censorship.
Well, clearly, as a libertarian, I'm pro 2A. I mean, there's no doubt. Of course I am. The issue is, how do we make it work in New York State? For people who are pro Second Amendment, we have to realize something. The vast majority of New Yorkers are not. New York State is not pro 2A. It is an anti-gun state in every way, shape, and form. Still 60% of New Yorkers or more want more gun control, and we literally passed 10 gun laws this year, and they still want more. So, wow, it is crazy. I disagree completely. I think we should be loosening gun laws, letting more people be able to defend themselves as they see fit. I do not want only the cops to have guns. I do want, as you disarm your people, right, as you disarm them, they become less and less, independent. So I absolutely do not want that to be the case.
Water break.
Yes, excuse me. Sorry about that. But the reality of it is, this goes back to possession. Possession of a firearm should not be a crime. I don't believe that. Did you do something with the firearm? Did you hit somebody over the head with it? Did you brandish it? Did you shoot somebody with it? These are all crimes. Yes, you're doing the thing. Now, can I make that happen in New York State? No, it's not realistic. It's not going to happen right now. But I can make it happen in a couple of years. Why? Because right now, people don't realize right now the SAFE Act, which is our most aggressive law when it comes to guns, is not being used at all to stop the crazy militiamen. It's actually being used in the cities to put poor black and brown people in jail. The prosecutors are taking it and putting all these charges on these kids so that they actually just plead. So I'm going to be very clear when I say this. Gun control is racist. Let me repeat it because you may not believe that. Gun control is racist. I'm not making that up. That's a fact. That's what's happening right now in New York. 90% of all gun charges in New York State are people who are black and or brown. 90%. And it's almost all in cities. Over 80% are all in cities. So what is it doing? It's allowing people to get hammered who are poor and black and brown. If you're a Democrat, you say you care about the population. As you tell me, I hear it every day. People of color, young people of color. I hear it every day. Yet you create laws that put them in jail. So gun laws are racist. They're also unconstitutional and immoral, but more importantly, they're racist. So what can we actually do? Number one, just be straight up on saying if you have a firearm and it is locked and unloaded, that you can transport it anywhere in New York State. That is a bare minimum that we should have. And we don't. If you take your legally owned firearm and go to New York City, you will go to Rikers Island, the most violent prison, the most violent jail in the country, even if you legally own it. That's how bad it is. So no, we want to make that simple. Next, we want to change the definition of loaded in New York State. In New York State, a loaded weapon is a weapon in the vicinity of ammunition. That's loaded in New York State. So box here and that there, it's loaded now in New York State. Next, I want to make New York State a shall issue state, which means if in 90 days you are not given your permit, you get it. Shall issue, not may issue. But can a local municipality tell you no? I think they can. They can tell you no. I'm okay with that. But here's the issue. If they tell you no, they must give you a reason and they must give you an appeals process. They don't do that now. They can just say no for whatever reason they want. Now, I know you people who are pro-2A are like, Larry, that's crazy. That's the state I live in. That's what I can do to make it easier to have the Second Amendment respected. Right now in New York State, the Second Amendment is a second suggestion. I want it to be an actual Second Amendment. So you got to give me a couple years before I move the state in the right direction.
Well, first I want people to think about something Larry said that is true. And there's good data for this. And that is that the enforcement of the gun laws we have been very discriminatory toward poor Black and brown kids, mainly young people. It's real clear if you look at the data. And there's a history of that. Ronald Reagan started pushing gun control when the Black Panther Party started doing their, police patrols to prevent them from abusing members of the community. And that got a lot of attention because they walked into the state capitol with arms. And that was a mistake. They wanted to go to the gallery, and the freaked out security guy just pointed toward the chamber. And they ended up there, and it was a big headline. And so the gun control that Reagan passed was aimed at the Black Panther Party about an issue that really wasn't an issue. So the discrimination and enforcement of New York guns laws is a real problem. But that's a problem with the whole criminal justice system. My general position on gun safety is it's like a driver's license. There should be some regulations so you can operate a vehicle or have firearms. And, I'm fine with law-abiding citizens having firearms. But I also think we have the right to have gun safety regulations in the public interest. Now, from that general perspective, which is actually in the Heller decision from the Supreme Court, the devil is in the details. And how we deal with, there's so many complications in the gun laws. And for a former Marine, I'm not very up to date as maybe some are, because I'm not in the Marines. I don't need a gun for what I do. So I just haven't paid that close attention. But I will say generally, I think we ought to have universal background checks and things like waiting periods and red flag laws. But again, the criminal justice system that deals with those red flag laws is a problem. But that's a problem with all our laws and how they're enforced unfairly, which is a whole nother topic. How do we reform the criminal justice system?
Well, I want to bring up what's in the chat. They're talking about a lot of people yelling the shall not be infringed. I get that all the time. What you have to realize, if you're a 2A supporter and you believe that, that's great. But the vast majority of New Yorkers don't care about that. And that may make you angry. I get it. It makes me angry too. But the reality of it is they don't care. So, you know what I can use? I can't use constitutional. They don't care. But I can use racist. The left cares about race. This is why I bring it up. Immoral, unconstitutional, racist. And I use whichever argument that I think is appropriate and that will work with the person in front of me. And if that happens to be racist, that's what I use. If it happens to be Constitution, that's what I use. I use the argument that will work that's in front of me.
I'd like to ask one more question. I think we're going to go to closing statements after that. So my question is on education policy. So I'm actually really curious. There's been a lot of conversation over the last few years about charter schools and charter school cap, your position on that, and also what your general education policy would be for New York State, where we see a lot of inequality, even though, like has been said, there's a lot of money spent, what you'd like to see happen. So I think Howie is first on this.
Well, I don't think the charter school cap should be lifted. I think public money should go to public schools. Charter schools are no more public schools than Lockheed Martin is a publicly owned, state-owned enterprise because it gets most of its money from the Pentagon on contracts. So, and I don't think the charter schools have performed any better, in some cases much worse, and they're draining money from the public schools. So I would keep the cap. In general, I think public schools should be fully funded. Larry pointed out that we do fund at a high per capita level, but part of the reason for that is our wealthy suburbs spend a lot of money of their own money, not state money, that brings that average up. And then there are other school districts that are really suffering from lack of funding in upstate rural New York as well as in the inner cities of the upstate cities. So those communities need to be fully funded. I think we should, where they're needed, have community schools with wraparound services because they're not available in these disadvantaged communities, and the schools need to provide things like food and medical assistance and childcare for parents and those kinds of things. And then another issue, which is not discussed, is New York State in its urban areas have the most segregated schools in the country. This is not Alabama or Mississippi. This is New York State. And that partly or largely comes because the real estate market has, created residential segregation. But when it comes to, and we've seen this in New York City, where they want to redraw the districts, and affluent white communities get upset if they're going to bring more young, poorer people of color into those schools. We've got to address that. And I think that what that requires is, redrawing the districts. I mean, here in Syracuse, the city limit is the segregation line. It's the Jim Crow line. So, and their schools, a stone's throw from each other. One is all white and the other is largely people of color. So if we redrew the district lines, we would desegregate. And that has a lot of advantages, not just for the opportunities it gives to disadvantaged people, but I think we have a lot of white people in suburbs isolated from other people. And that's where these racist myths fester. And, you've seen this, like when we used to have anonymous comments on Syracuse Post-Standard newspaper, the racism was just unbelievable. That's out there. And so desegregation, I think, is a high priority that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. Larry, go ahead.
So I think we have to change the entire system. The entire thing is completely broken. It must be blown up and rebooted from scratch. And that's how bad I think it is. About 30% of all the money that goes to either pensions or goes something like that. We have administrators who make $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year, while teachers make 60 or 70. We have some school districts where there are more administrators than actual teachers. We have a system to where if they don't spend the money, they have to then they have to spend it or they lose it. So that literally it's asking for waste, fraud, and abuse. Everything's broken. Not just that. Why do we have kids going to 11th and 12th grade? It's failing completely. We shouldn't even have that system. Our system should change in two fundamental ways. Number one, no more K through 12. It should be pre-K through 10. That's it, pre-K through 10. Europeans do it that way. Lots of people do it that way. That's all that matters. The last 2 years for most kids in high school is smoking weed and hanging out and video games and stuff. And then they're not ready for college. And of course, you have people who, of course, go legalize child labor. I saw that comment. You are, of course, nothing but a child yourself. So imagine that now we're going to start putting kids into like factories and they're going to die in looms. No, get them out to learn something at 16 years old. If you pass your test, you get a high school diploma, you have 5 different choices. 1, go to a prep school. A prep school so you're ready for college. So you're not spending 6 years in college. You are instead spending 2 or 3 years in college because you prepared yourself effectively. That's going to be less debt, better everything. You're out and to fight right away. Second, don't go to prep school. Go to a great school because you know already. Get your 2-year degree right away. You already know. Good. Do it. That's not good enough for you. No worries. Go to trade school. We need tradespeople in New York State desperately. Go to a trade school for the last 2 years. When you're done, you're either ready for your apprenticeship or you're ready to go make money. That's what we should be doing in our last 2 years. If you don't want any of that, go get a job. I don't care. Do what you think's appropriate. But Larry, how are you going to pay for those things? New York State must pay for the last 2 years in the Constitution. Awesome. We are actually going to follow the way when I was in Marine Corps, when I got out, I got the GI Bill. I got X $1,000. I had 10 years to use it. Every kid gets $20,000, 5 years to use it. Here's what I promise you. A bunch of prep schools, trade schools, all those schools will all of a sudden pop up, and they'll all cost $20,000 for 2 years because that's government money. That's what always happens. You get to pick and go to the schools that you want to go. You make decisions. But Larry, oh my God, 16-year-olds will make mistakes. Yeah. And the price for failure at 16 is nothing compared to 26. Not even close. Let them fail at 16. Then they figure some stuff out. Let them also learn how to actually deal with life. Let them know that when your boss says show up at 9, she doesn't mean 10:30. She means 8:45. Learn that when you're 16, 17, 18. So by the time you get to that grade, you're 23, 24, you actually can know how to hold down a job and have some discipline. Our kids are failing. Our system is failing. It's embarrassingly bad. Now, funding it should all be funded by that same trust I said earlier that will pay for education, which by default will end school tax because it will pay for it. Without school tax, property tax goes down by about half. Property tax goes down by half. New Yorkers stay here in New York and raise their families here, which is what I want them to do. Not just that, it goes to every district per kid. Money follows the kid. I don't care what district you go to. You can live where you want, do whatever you want. Wherever that kid's registered a district, they get the money. Now, here's the best part, though. Say you decide, you know what, Larry, I don't want to go to the public school. It's not good enough for me. I'm going to go to private school or I'm going to homeschool. Great, $6,000 credit for you to actually open up your own private school or homeschool. Now you got a credit to pay for that. But to keep communities together, you can still go to the local school district. You want to be in a football team, you want to be in a math club, whatever the case may be. This is how you can make this work a far better system. It'll take several years to implement, and there will be some disruption. But right now, our current system is a steaming pile of garbage. There are parts of Rochester to where if you are a black male, the odds of you graduating high school are less than 20%. So whatever you might say, Larry, your idea is bad. It's way better than what we have now. Now it is garbage. Sermon over.
Hot take.
So I would not, without agreeing with all the details of Larry's plan, I would say we do need to stop devaluing trades and vocational training. And we should stop tracking. I was able to come up in a public high school in California where I could take both college prep and vocational courses. Now you got to choose in most cases. You can't do one or the other. I mean, you got to do one or the other. And that's a problem because, you know, the trades are important. We have shortage of people with high-tech skills and or building trade skills, and they're devalued. So, you know, my last 20 years of my working life, I was unloading trucks with my bare hands, you know, at UPS. And young kids would come in and they would have a bad attitude. They wouldn't last long. It felt like they were too good for that. And actually they weren't qualified for anything else. And a lot of those kids end up on the street. So I think it's important to value vocational training, and that those tracks should be available within the public school system. And we should reduce the tracking, have more, because that's part of the segregation too. Even within high schools that have, you know, there's a high school here, you've got the college prep wing of the school, and it's almost all white kids, and the other wing is mostly black and brown kids in the vocational tracks. And they're on the same football team, but they're not in the same classes. And, you know, that's segregation as well. And then the high stakes testing, you know, that is what starts the tracking.
Yes.
We just got to stop that. You know, we can use the test for evaluation. The NAEP is just a sample of kids in a school. It gives you a picture of, you know, how they're doing. You shouldn't have to make all these kids go through all these tests and spend all this time and have the teacher spend all this time in there teaching to teach to the test. It gets away from, you know, real learning. And, you know, I think part of what I like about Larry's idea, it goes back to John Dewey, where he wanted, you know, kids in their teenagers to get practical, real life experiences along with academic work. It makes it more relevant. You know, the Algebra Project, Bob Moses, leader in the civil rights movement, came back. He went to Africa for a while, came back, and he started teaching algebra to young, low-income black kids by, for example, in New York City, using algebra to figure out how to get where they needed to go on the subway system, given the schedule. And for the kids, that became like, yeah, I want to know that. And they learned algebra that way. And they weren't learning it in the way it was being taught in the schools. So there's a lot we could do to improve the public education system, no doubt. And the bureaucracy that Larry talked about is true too. Too many administrators, not enough teachers, and teachers aren't valued and paid enough. So that is another thing we gotta change.
I wanted
if
to.
I could just put a exclamation point on what Howie said. There's an exclamation point. He's 100% right in all those things, and the testing's got to go too. When kids are, particularly when they're little and they take those tests, and if they're not good test takers, it doesn't show any value of their intelligence. Now, all of a sudden, they are labeled the bad kid or the dumb kid, and that sticks with them, and it's not even accurate. So thank you, Howie. Yes, I wish I had said that. 100% agree.
So I wanted to thank Larry and Howie for being here. I think this debate has been awesome. I wanted to thank Chrissie.
I had a blast.
And I want to thank everybody who's been watching. And you can vote for Larry or Howie as a write-in, and we encourage it on your ballot. Just make sure you stay in the lines, otherwise they may not accept it. But you can definitely vote. So I don't know, Chrissie, if you have anything else that you wanted to add.
No, that was great. Yeah, I guess we can do our closing statements and anything that anyone else wanted to add that we forgot to ask or didn't ask. I guess we could start with Larry.
Sure. We have been robbed. That's what we have. We've been robbed. We've been robbed of choice. We've been robbed of the opportunity to make change. We have been robbed by our own state. We are being robbed daily. We are being robbed of our freedom, robbed of our money, robbed of our opportunity. We are being robbed. So we have to change that. How can we change that? Well, Larry, this time there's a chance that this could happen or this could happen. No, that's all a lie. Because no matter who wins, the Republican or Democrat, doesn't matter. They give us the same thing. To be forward, unless a miracle happens, Kathy Hochul is going to win again. Why? Because the Republicans made sure to throw off people like me and Howie. We were the only types of people who could have made an actual coalition against the establishment to beat her. That was the only chance. Was it a coalition against the establishment? And when you get rid of all third parties, there can be no coalition. So the establishment consistently wins. We have to stop that without question. The Democrats were the first ones who beat us up. And then after that, the Republicans agreed. And then this year, the Democrats sued Howie off and the Republicans sued me off the ballot. They took your taxpayer dollars, they took your donations, and they took that and took us to court and they threw us off the ballot. They used your money literally to take away your choice. When they take away your choice, they take away your voice. Whatever you do, whether you prefer what Howie said or what I said, don't you dare vote for a Democrat or Republican if you're a New Yorker. If you do, shame on you. Let me say it again. If you do, shame on you. You are literally you literally have Stockholm syndrome. You are allowing your oppressor to actually say, oh no, I love my oppressor. No, don't you dare do that. If you prefer me, write in Larry Sharpe November 8th. You prefer Howie, write in Howie Hawkins November 8th. Don't you dare do anything else. Because if we actually get 130,000 votes, either one of us, there will be an independent party in New York State. Now, I know people say all the time, wait a minute, Larry, there are actually other parties. They're all parasite parties. They're not real. The only parties that actually run candidates and don't just piggyback off someone else is the Green Party, Libertarian Party. And that's why you see us here. That's it. You must, without question, you must, if you care about your state, if you care about freedom, if you care about having choice, you must write in either Larry Sharpe or Howie Hawkins, if you're a New Yorker, November 8th, no matter what. Everything else is a lie. Don't believe it. They are lying to you. You have Stockholm syndrome. By the way, LarrySharpe.com, just to be clear, and someone wants to know what I'm doing, head over to my YouTube page, Larry Sharpe. Literally, I have in 8 hours from 2 weeks ago, 8 hours of policy straight, 8 hours straight, and it is time-stamped for your convenience.
Oh, wow.
Well, once again, I want to thank Chrissie for hosting this and Peter for being a moderator and Larry for agreeing to this. I emailed him a couple of weeks ago and said, we should do a debate because the Hochul Zeldin debate is going to be not very enlightening for the voters. And, we finally got it together and I'm glad we did. Larry mentioned, these government lawyers for the Board of Elections, arguing for the law that made it impossible for the real independent parties to be on the ballot. And it's worse than that. The judges, the district court judge made a decision that got the facts in the law wrong. And our lawyers, corrected him in their briefs to the Second Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals. And a 3-person bench from that, or panel from that court, issued an insulting, disrespectful 2-sentence decision. Said, we're affirming the district court. So we're appealing. It's called en banc. You get the whole court, long shot, but we're fighting there and we're going to fight for legislation. But, you got to vote for one of us just as a vote of protest to this terrible system they set up where you got two corporate funded candidates. They really don't have solutions, and their whole, election campaign is about saying how bad the other candidate is. And if you, as I said before, if you vote for the lesser evil, who doesn't support what you want, you're voting against yourself. You get lost in the sauce because if the things you want, I use the example of single payer health care, and that's what you want, and you don't vote for the candidate that supports it, you're voting against it because Hochul's against it, Zeldin's against it. So, a write-in vote for me and Gloria Matera is a vote for a Green New Deal, an economic Bill of Rights, and probably the most important issue, an inclusive multi-party democracy. So the way you write in is you go down that gubernatorial column to the bottom, and there's a write-in box. And in my case, you write in Howie Hawkins and Gloria Matera, my running mate for lieutenant governor, Mattera, and keep it within the box or it won't count. And, make yourself heard. Your vote is your voice. So speak up and make the politicians come to you.
Yes. Break the code, hack the system, write in the answer you want, not the ones they provide to you. This was great, guys. I want to give Peter a chance to plug anything he wants to plug.
I just want to say, if you're interested in what you've heard tonight, beyond November 8th, get involved with the Green Party, get involved with the Libertarian Party. Our website is gpny.org. We're on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. Find us. Help us build an alternative here in New York State. Whatever your values are, whatever your principles are, we need an alternative. We're not going anywhere. Even if we don't have a ballot line, we're working to build democracy, and we need your help.
Awesome. Yeah, this was really great. This was a fun debate. Nobody insulted anybody, which I'm a little upset about. No, it's okay. It was great. Thank you, Howie, Larry, Peter. Thank you to the chat. For some of you had some very good questions, so we appreciate that. And hopefully we can do this again sometime. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Bye.